Well, first things first, Gary, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm not flying around Europe doing interviews. I'm doing them all from my house, which is really nice.
From the convenience of your own home.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, before we talk about your new album, I'd like to jump back a little bit to when you first started writing songs. Now, do you remember what attracted you to not just being in a band, but to writing songs, to get thoughts onto paper?
Yeah, I do. I got a guitar bought for me for Christmas by my parents when I was 11, and this is 1971, and they bought me a Burt Weedon Playing a Day book, and Burt Weedon was like a guitarist at the time, and he had this very famous book. And actually, I've spoken to a lot of guitarists, famous ones who learned that way, and I remember learning four chords. So I wasn't a three chord learner; I was a four chord learner, and it was for another song. It was for If I Had a Hammer or something. I think it was for If I Had a Hammer. And I immediately remember just sort of like suddenly being able to sing this song and then thinking, well, I really like the chords, but I really don't like the song. And the song has nothing to do with me. So I wrote a different tune and I wrote some words. And then I immediately realized, wow, I own something. I own something that didn't exist a while ago now exists, and it's part of me, and it's an expression of me. And I quickly wrote another song, and I called it Alone, and it was in a minor key, of course. And I played it to my mom, and she said, "You can't play that to anyone; they'll think you're depressed." But I think it was this idea of ownership of music, of making it belong to me. I felt like I was making little pieces of armor that when I walked out of my bedroom, I was stronger, I was bigger. I was sort of turning into someone else through my songs.
In that sense, when did the idea of sharing those songs with kind of the outside world start playing a role?
I think I got encouraged at school. So I remember playing those two songs to my school for prize giving. And I think I'd probably already done it anyway. And it was quite a key moment in my life because there was a great guy who was giving the prizes out, a man called Bishop Trevor Huddleston, who was the head of the anti-apartheid movement. Mm-hmm. And he came to my house a few days later, well, flat that we lived in, unannounced. We had no telephone, wearing a purple robe and carrying a Philips cassette recorder. And he said, "Look, every time you write a song, I want you to record it and send it to me." And Top of the Pops was on at that moment. And on it was Rod Stewart singing Maggie May. And I went, that's what I do. That's what I do. He was incredible. He said, I had just given this trumpet to a young black kid in South Africa who's a trumpet player. And anyway, years later, he got in touch with me again for the first time. And he said, would I do an anti-apartheid concert? 100,000 people. And I got up and I sang Through the Barricades. And when I got there, he said, this is a great moment for me because not only are you here, but this guy I gave a trumpet to in Africa is here, and it's Hugh Masekela. Mm. So, who's a huge name, or was, who's passed away now. So that guy was very significant in my life as a songwriter.
Did that moment and kind of early on in your life, did that give you a lot of confidence as a songwriter?
Yeah. I mean, I had quite a lot of confidence anyway. I was a child actor by chance. I went to a drama club and I was getting lots of parts. I was forming bands really early on, but he was a mentor. Yeah, absolutely, a mentor, and encouraged me. But I was in bands when I was 14 with guys in their late 20s, early 30s, playing pubs and playing my songs as well that I wrote for these guys to sing. So, I was quite precocious as a kid as far as making music. I always wrote. That was my thing. I was never interested in copying other people's guitar licks. You get these guys on the internet and all they do is they learn how to play David Gilmour backwards. Never interested me. I wouldn't even, a bit of Mick Ronson maybe. All I was really interested in was writing songs and lyrics.
Once Spandau Ballet was formed and then the song started being received really well, what did that do for you? Was that another kind of milestone in a sense of confidence and kind of, hey, I can actually do this?
Well, I think at the beginning of Spandau, it was the songs were I quickly flipped as a songwriter, and I took a lot of influence from what was going on with electronica at the time, with Kraftwerk, etc. And we made sort of garage electronic music, a bit like like on To Cut a Long Story Short. We were a cult band at that time. And I was always sort of chasing what was happening in Soho in London, oh, let's drop electronica. Now I'm going to go funky with chart number one. And then there came a moment when I wanted to write songs. I didn't want to write beats anymore and riffs. And I really wanted to write something that was more classic in a way. And that was when I started doing the True album. I was 22. I was still living at home with my parents, and I started writing that. Confidence wise, what it does is, when you start to have really big hits, then you start to worry. That's when you start to worry, because then you think, how do I follow this up? And it's not about me following up for myself. It's how do I follow it up and keep my bandmates in the lifestyle that they would like, and keep this band happening. And that is probably the most pressure you can have.
Yeah, well, one of my questions that I had was, what is the most difficult thing of being in a band? Is it kind of keeping that upwards trajectory going, in a sense?
I think the most difficult thing about being in a band is being limited to the voicings that are in that band. Being, on stage is easy. In the studio is less easy, but doable. When I think the best time is when everyone agrees on what they do and the chemistry is perfect and there's no one going, I really want to be doing what he's doing. So everyone's happy in their roles. And I think that's when you have the equanimity is perfect at that point. And then, of course, later on, there always comes a moment when people want, people are getting fed up. They're not getting enough attention or whatever it might be. I think the hardest bit is being in a band is they're the only people you're with all the time. And when you're touring, there's no going home. If someone said to you, on your first day at work, you walk into an office and there's 4 other guys in the office and they say, hey, these are your workmates. Oh, and by the way, you will have to work with them for the rest of your lives. Right? It's kind of weird. It's mad. Sure. So I think after 10 years, definitely the cracks start to show because of that.
And then one last thing about this era for you, but writing as a songwriter, having written all those hit songs, I always wonder, are they the favorites of the songwriters themselves, or were you surprised by some that did well, or did you some that didn't do as well as you expected?
Yeah, they're not always your favorite songs. No, I mean, they're, everyone. You're so in the moment when you're making records. It's pop. You're thinking, I've done 4 minutes and it's going to come out and it's going to be a hit, and then next week it won't be. I don't think anyone was thinking about writing classics at the time. And sometimes the songs maybe weren't as great as the one before. I mean, we had a song called Instinction on our second album, and we started to panic because that was at a point in, when one of the singles, She Loved Like Diamond, hadn't done so well. And it was like, oh, wow, this could all crash and burn right now. And I could hear Instinction was good. And then but it wasn't produced right. So we went in and we re-recorded quite a lot with Trevor Horn, came out, was a top 10 hit. She Loved Like Diamond, which was that song that nearly killed us, which never even made the top 40. It was the moment in our Spandau's career when it all looked like it was going to go wobbly in the early days. I always knew that was a great song, and we got to re-record it for the and there were people going, oh, it's not, maybe it's just the song's not good, that's why it's not a hit. But I knew it was a good song. We just didn't have the maturity to know how to put it down. And then much later, when the band got back together again for the album Once More, we did a sort of more orchestral acoustic version of it, and it was great. I mean, it was one of the best parts of the show when we came back. So sometimes it's not always about the song. Sometimes it's just you haven't really produced it, arranged it, and recorded it right.
You mentioned something interesting, which is perhaps you weren't ready to write that song or produce the song the way it should be. in that sense, do you think that as a songwriter, you've been in music for 40 plus years, do you think that as a songwriter, you're now at the best that you ever were?
Yes, I do. I think, I sort of know what I want, and I know how to achieve that.
Mm.
I'm really into sonic landscapes and audio quality. I tried to make indie sounding records, and I can never do that. I'm always like, I just want it to sound a little bit better. Um, but I think I know how to enhance a song. The problem is nowadays the options are so great when you're recording, when you're on your computer. You can have any instrument in the world and all kinds of keyboards, and so people tend to sort of like overdub. They do too much.
Mm.
And what I wanted to do on this album was to keep as little from the computer demos as possible, and replace all the plastic Wurlitzers and pianos with the real thing, and the Hammond real thing. And there's very little on there that's fake, and I think that was important.
When was the idea for Insolo conceived? Was it because of the world slowed down?
No, I wrote most of it. Apart from Too Much, I wrote all of it in 2019 when I was on the road with Nick Mason, and
Right.
and I think that was a really important part of my creative sort of burst out, because I'd finally, believe it or not, it took me a long time, but I'd finally severed the past. I'd moved away from Spandau Ballet. I'd moved away from the way people envisaged me to be as a guitar player, as a songwriter, into a world of music that maybe took a lot of people by surprise, but liberated me as I could play more guitar. I start to sing, lead in the band. And I'm happy in this group. We all go to dinner together. We all get on. There's no difficulty. But I'm playing other people's songs. And maybe that was also what was going on in my head. I also turned 60, and that's a major moment for anyone if you get there, and it's better than not getting there. And I found myself writing a lot of lyrics on this tour, knowing that I was going to put tunes to them when I got back. Sometimes I wrote tunes while I was on tour as well, but it was mostly writing lyrics that were about me and the questions that I had in my head and where I was in my life and how I felt about that, and asking how other people feel about it. And it felt like an album concept was growing that was much more autobiographical. These weren't songs that I was putting away for Spandau Ballet if we ever get back together again. These were songs that needed to be sung by me because they were about me, and I could feel, I needed that connection and truth, that only I could give to the words because it was coming from my heart.
Right. And what I find very interesting, because you wrote a little bit about memory and how kind of our past informs the future. And with what you just mentioned, I have this feeling of perhaps a sense of identity. I can imagine when you're in a really successful band, as you have been, that becomes your identity. And like you said, it's very difficult then to separate yourself from that. What allowed you to do that? What made that? Was it just time?
No, I think it was definitely playing the early Pink Floyd stuff and getting up. Okay. And then, but obviously we weren't copying anyone when we were doing that, because Nick Mason said, let's make these songs our own. The guitar solos aren't purple, play guitar, whatever, let's do stuff that isn't on the record and add stuff. And I think that was the liberation. It was really me as well. I was sort of feel, I still look after the catalog, I've never sold my publishing, so we my office in London runs that. And so my head is always within the old material. And there's always this possibility, or there was this sense of possibility that we might get back together. And should I be still, and I was still writing songs thinking about Tony singing them. So suddenly that wasn't happening. Suddenly there was a real flow, and I felt unblocked as a writer. I felt like I could write the truth for the first time. I realized that you get to a certain age, you've experienced so much in your life, so many ups and downs, that there's no need to make anything up anymore. You
Mm.
can, even if the song is a story that looks like it's about someone else, there's lots of my reality in that.
What for you then was the most difficult song you had to write, or you wrote that ended up on the album?
Well, I think difficult is interesting.
In terms of getting it right.
Well, let me just answer in the way I thought that you meant, is because I Am the Past is quite a difficult song in that I wrote it very quickly. I was in St. Louis. It still says St. Louis. It says St. Louis under the lyrics where because I am the past trying to be here is a line that can sound, I don't want to say depressing. It's openly honest about how I felt at that time. I'm not as strong as I was. I'm not as fast as I was, as quick as I was. That's impossible. You get to my age, you must, I've hit the peak a while ago, right? Of strength. And so I've put it in a setting which was kind of like my mind. It was like an old Western sharpshooter, who's with a woman and he's trying to say, why am I important to you? You never see me at my best. And I think that was a difficult song because it was really exposing my feelings. I Remember You was the same. It was exposing my concerns about aging, if you like. So, but I suppose the song that I tampered with the most, more than any other, and because I knew there was something quite dramatic in there, but I think I was being ambitious with it, was Insolo itself, the opening track on the album.
What made that such an ambitious track?
Because I wanted to really orchestrate it and extend it, have more different parts coming in there. It wasn't the straight up verse chorus, middle eight sort of, there were different sections within the song that I was developing as I went along. I had the initial song, which is really about this woman and a man separately going to work and then them coming together at the end and you realizing they're a partnership. And I knew that it's about living in a very busy city and the irony of the paradox of feeling isolated. So I needed it to be quite a big, lush kind of orchestrated piece because that was the city. They were the buildings, and it couldn't be just acoustic guitar. That always seems to me like you're out in a field. So, but then I wanted to take it in different directions at different times. And I think working with the Floyd material has helped me not feel self-conscious about doing that, so I can musically extend things and have different instrumentation and seeing it cinematically. So that whole middle section with the guitar solo and the sort of Greek chorus vocal that's in the center of that song, that was added later. So I'd already started the recording and that didn't exist. And then I sort of realized that I wanted to go somewhere else. And I put that in. So it was slightly difficult. I was always tampering with that song. That was one of the first songs I started recording and one of the last I finished recording.
Right. And that sentiment of, because I remember Stephen Fry writing a similar thing of feeling alone in a full room and those kinds of things, that sentiment. Did that coincide with that idea of aging, or were they very separate things?
No, I think they were separate things, really. But I did end up making a sort of a slight connection. I bookended the album outside of the final kind of epilogue at the end with Our Light, because I was so fascinated by these characters that I'd been writing about, and I think one of the influences was definitely Edward Hopper and his paintings, that I wanted to I felt that I needed to see what happened to them, and I wrote a song called The Haunted, which is about them. It's about the house they once lived in. It's an experience I've had. I've been through divorce. But I then also introduced, took some of the musical themes and put those at the introduction of that song, The Haunted, and they bookend the album. So I think there was definitely, there's stuff happening that draws lines between different songs on this record, this was not a bunch of songs that had been written over the last God knows how many years and put away for Spandau or not, and then me just sort of like sticking them all together. I really felt there was a thematic kind of feeling, and also, you know, then the lockdown happens, and Insolo takes on a whole other resonance.
Right, definitely. And then, like you said, that there are a lot of connections between the songs, I would say. So was it difficult then for you to compile this album, to get the order right?
Yeah, no, yeah, yes, I suppose it was. You know, really important for me to sequence. I only sequence with vinyl in mind. I can't imagine another world other than all albums should be 2 acts. You know, I know that CDs have been going since the early 80s, and we made CDs, but Spandau in the 80s always sequence for vinyl. So, you know, what's the last track on side 1? What's the beginning of side 2? Penultimate tracks, all of that. And so I played around a lot with Insolo. That was, you know, was that going to end the album? But then I thought, you know what, I'll put it at the beginning and it lays my cards on the table. This isn't what you expect from me. You know, it's not what you've heard me do for Spandau Ballet. This is completely different. This is drama and then it, you know, I built the album by realizing that Insolo and The Haunted were at the opposite ends of the record, and the Our Light, I wanted to end on a positive note. Which is, you know, the real love song I wrote about my wife and I and our journey together, and that went last.
And now, kind of to round off then, because this is your second solo album. Like you said, you had to kind of separate yourself from Spandau just to get that writing going again. And so where are you? Where's your mind space now? Because obviously everybody will ask you, okay, is Spandau ever gonna be together again and all that kind of stuff. But for you as a songwriter, where are you now?
Well, I'm so happy writing for myself, and I don't really feel the urge to write for someone else at the moment. I would love to take this out live. I can't. I've got commitments to Nick, you know, and we're touring for the first 6 months of next year is my commitment there, and I'm looking forward to that. But I'm already halfway through the next record. I've sort of, you know, I've got half a dozen tracks that I'm really happy with, that I'm you know, so I'm just in that writing process still, which has not stopped for me since this record. And I think that's so that's where I'm going to go. You know, I think, you know, whether or not record companies want it, I don't know. I'm going to keep making music for myself.
But yeah, that was going to be my question. So we won't have to wait another 25 years for another solo album.
No, I don't know why I was so reticent. I got slightly burned on the first one, which I'm still really proud of. It came out in '95 when Britpop was happening, and I don't think it really hit a nerve. And then, you know, life gets taken up with other things.
Well, one last question then. Is it more nerve-wracking releasing an album just under your own name rather than as a band or as a group?
I think it probably is, yeah, because you can always take the blows you know, it's spread out more amongst 5 people. You know, I still feel conscious when I was writing for Spandau of you know, this is my song, guys. But by the time we'd made it, everyone had agreed on that. I think it is more, you know, you don't want to, you're the only one who's going to fail, put it that way. And that can be hard.
Well, hopefully you won't fail this time then. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to hear another album from you very soon.
Thanks, Robin. All the best.
All right, Gary, have a good one.